In Italy, buried behind the world-famous names of Ferrari, Maserati, Jeep, Chrysler, and even the Economist, there is one family whose influence stretches further than most governments. They own Juventus, a football club valued at more than $2 billion. They command Italy's largest bank. They hold the levers to nearly 30% of Italy's stock market, with more than 360,000 people working under companies they control around the world. Yet most people outside Italy don't even know their name. The Agnelli family isn't just a wealthy dynasty. For more than a century, they have been the invisible engine behind Italy's growth, crisis, politics, industries, culture, and global identity. They are the family that, quietly but unmistakably, decides whether Italy's economy rises or falls. And their power didn't come from loyalty to any ideology. They survived, expanded, and thrived by playing every side: fascists, allies, communists, capitalists. Whoever held power, the Agnellis found a way to stand beside them. This is the story of the family that shaped the fate of Italy. In Italy, real power rarely changes hands. It flows like an inheritance, passing from palaces to boardrooms, from elder statesmen to industrial heirs. Across Italian history, a few names always seem to hover in the background: the Benettons controlling infrastructure, the Pirellis steering industry, the Berlusconis shaping media. But none come close to the colossal influence of the Agnellis. They are the industrial royalty of Italy, building and acquiring the country's most iconic companies and quietly shaping its culture. Their empire begins with one name: Fiat. The company that would come to define Italian innovation started as a daring bet, a spark created at a time when Italy barely had paved roads. At one point, Giovanni Agnelli's companies alone powered nearly 8% of Italy's GDP. Government policies shifted to match Fiat's needs. Cities grew around its factories. Italians built their lives around its stability. But long before Fiat became an empire, the Agnellis were simply a modest family from Turin with a risky idea. The year was 1899, and Italy was still an awkward young country trying to find its identity. The North was beginning to industrialize, while much of the South remained rural, poor, and disconnected. Into this uncertain, uneven nation stepped Giovanni Agnelli, a former cavalry officer with a knack for recognizing opportunity where others saw disorder. While many clung to the past, Agnelli was thinking about engines, machines, and the promise of speed. With a small circle of investors, he founded Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino, Fiat. In 1900, the first Fiat factory opened its doors, its floors crowded with just 35 workers building 24 cars by hand. It was tiny, fragile, and ambitious. But in a country where cars were unfamiliar novelties, where roads were little more than dusty paths, this was revolutionary. Agnelli didn't just build a company. He created Italy's automotive industry from zero. By 1904, production had multiplied. By 1906, Fiat was producing over 1,000 cars a year and had already opened a dealership in New York, years before most Italians had ever seen a car. Fiat expanded, modernized, and set new standards by buying patents and adopting cutting-edge production techniques. But progress rarely comes without friction. In 1908, Fiat was thrown into crisis. A financial scandal erupted. Accusations of falsified accounts and inflated share prices spread through the press. The board was forced to resign. Giovanni Agnelli himself was dragged into court, accused of manipulating stocks. Though prosecutors couldn't prove the charges and he walked free, his reputation took a hit that would reshape him forever. From then on, Agnelli became more guarded, more calculating, and more strategic. He had learned that power could be fragile, so he started building a foundation no scandal could shake. When World War I arrived, he moved swiftly. Fiat's factories shifted into wartime production overnight. Trucks, tanks, airplanes, engines, anything the military needed, Fiat supplied. The company grew to more than 30,000 workers. The profits were enormous, and the accusations of war profiteering were loud. That's when Agnelli turned toward politics and formed one of the most controversial alliances of his life. In 1914, he quietly funded a rising nationalist figure, Benito Mussolini. Years later, when Fiat faced public outrage for its wartime profits, Mussolini returned the favor by burying the company's record. As fascism rose, Fiat flourished. By the late 1930s, it was the beating industrial heart of Italy. But when World War II began and the winds shifted, Giovanni Agnelli shifted with them. As Italy's alliance with Nazi Germany crumbled, Agnelli began expressing sympathy for the Allies, positioning himself and Fiat for survival in whatever future emerged. It was a strategic recalibration that saved the family. After the war, the Italian authorities seized parts of his assets for collaboration, briefly. The punishment was short-lived. Italy needed Fiat too desperately. The economy was wrecked, unemployment was high, and Fiat's factories were essential for rebuilding the country. The Agnellis survived again, and the empire was ready for its new ruler. In 1945, Giovanni's grandson, Gianni Agnelli, stepped into the spotlight. Charismatic, sharp, ambitious, and utterly fearless, Gianni would become one of the most powerful industrial figures in Europe. By 1963, he was managing director. 3 years later, chairman and CEO. Gianni was the face of modern Italy, impeccably dressed, well-connected, and constantly in motion. Under his leadership, Fiat helped rebuild the nation and turn Italy into a modern industrial power. But Gianni didn't see borders, he saw markets. During the Cold War, while the world split between East and West, he partnered with the Soviet Union itself. The deal built a massive factory capable of producing over 500,000 cars a year behind the Iron Curtain. It was proof that profit could cross ideological lines, and that the Agnellis were masters of playing both sides. Fiat expanded across continents, swallowing up Italy's most beloved automotive brands, Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Lancia, Maserati. Its logo appeared in factories from Moscow to South America. Under Gianni, Fiat reached peak power. 200,000 employees. 7 European Car of the Year awards. And 1 in 5 Italian manufacturing workers connected directly or indirectly to Fiat's supply chain. Entire towns, Turin, Mirafiori, Pomigliano, lived and breathed Fiat. A job there meant stability, pride, and membership in a national story. Fiat wasn't just a company. It was Italy. But even Gianni learned that money doesn't always win. In the late 1960s, he attempted to acquire Citroën, France's treasured auto icon. The Michelin family was ready to sell. The negotiations were moving fast. But French President Charles de Gaulle stepped in personally, blocking the sale. Fiat's influence had reached its limit. And in that moment, Gianni understood something crucial. Controlling machines wasn't enough. Real power came from controlling narratives, what people read, believed, discussed, and feared. Influence wasn't just built in factories. It was built in newspapers. Gianni had already owned his local paper, La Stampa, but decades later his grandson, John Elkann, would take the family's media influence global. Through their holding company, Exor, the Agnellis acquired nearly half of Gaeti, Italy's largest newspaper group, home to La Repubblica, La Stampa, and dozens of regional outlets. This wasn't just ownership. It was command over the stories that shaped public opinion, politics, and cultural identity across the country. And they didn't stop there. In 2015, Exor acquired 43% of the Economist group, giving the family influence over one of the world's most respected and widely circulated weeklies. The Economist doesn't just report news, it frames debates, influences policymakers, and shapes global economic narratives. Now, the Agnellis had a voice not just in Italy, but in London, Washington, Beijing, and beyond. But media wasn't their only path to influence. The family understood that the future of power lay in data, information that shapes industries, markets, and decisions before the public even knows what's happening. By 2024, Exor owned over 10% of Clarivate, a major global data and analytics firm. That stake could soon climb higher. In a world where information is currency, the Agnellis position themselves at the heart of its trade. They can see trends before they surface, anticipate which industries will rise, and align their investments to capture value before anyone else. Yet numbers and policies are only one part of influence. Culture is the other. And no family understood this more than the Agnellis. When you own what people love, you own a piece of their identity. In 1923, Edoardo Agnelli became president of Juventus. Football wasn't just a sport. It was passion, loyalty, unity. Juventus victories translated into national pride, and that pride flowed back to the family. Decades later, Fiat acquired Ferrari, first half, then nearly all of it. Ferrari wasn't just luxury. It was Italy's global halo, engineering perfection, beauty, danger, glamour. And that halo reflected onto the family itself. When Ferrari went public, the Agnellis retained almost half the voting power. They didn't need full ownership, they had full control. Meanwhile, their football empire continued to grow. From the 1980s to the 2010s, Juventus dominated Italian football just as Fiat dominated Italian industry. The parallel wasn't accidental. Sports shaped emotion. Industry shaped livelihood. Together, they secured the family's place in Italian culture. Today, the man at the helm is John Elkann. Calm, reserved, almost understated in public, but behind closed doors, he sits at the crossroads of Europe's corporate and political elite. As head of Exor, he oversees a €40 billion empire stretching across continents. But his real power comes from the rooms few ever see: European roundtables, think tanks, foundations, and industry councils. These are the places where CEOs, regulators, and politicians quietly shape policies long before they become law. Following the example of families like the Wallenbergs and Pritzkers, Elkann turned dynastic wealth into structural influence. Under his leadership, the Agnellis helped steer discussions on green technology, mobility, industrial policy, and energy transitions across Europe. And through all this, one truth becomes clear. The Agnellis are no longer merely Italy's automotive dynasty. They are architects of narratives, policies, and markets. They outlived monarchies, dictators, and political revolutions. Their power never came from a ballot box. It came from patience, strategy, and the ability to read history as it unfolded, and adjust before others even noticed change coming. So the question remains, in modern Europe, where democratic ideals guide the surface of politics, how much of the real foundation still belongs to old dynasties that never truly disappeared? If you've stayed with this story until now, drop a car emoji in the comments so I can see how many of you made it to the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.